The phone rang at 11:47 p.m. I was in bed, reading. One of those mystery novels my mom used to give me every Christmas. This one I'd bought myself. The bookmark was one she'd made me in 5th grade. Construction paper. Faded now. Unknown number. Michigan area code. I almost let it ring. Nobody calls that late unless something's wrong. Hello? She's dead. My brother's voice. Flat. Cold. Like he was reporting the weather. I sat up. The book slid off my lap. Hit the floor. What? Mom died last night. Thought you should know. Last night. She'd been dead for over 24 hours, and he was just calling me now, at midnight, on a Tuesday. What happened? My voice stayed level, calm. Years of teaching high school had taught me how to control panic. Heart attack, peaceful, in her sleep. He paused. I could hear him breathing, measured, rehearsed. Funeral Saturday, Greenwood Cemetery, noon. Keith, and before you ask, there's no inheritance for you. She left. Everything to me. The house, the savings, everything. So don't bother showing up expecting anything. The line went dead. I sat there, phone in my hand, the words echoing in the dark bedroom. You get nothing. I looked at the clock. 11:49 p.m. The red numbers glowed. My mother had been dead for over a day. My brother had waited until nearly midnight to tell me, and his first concern, before condolences, before grief, before anything, was making sure I knew I wasn't getting any money. I set the phone down on the nightstand. The room was dark except for the clock. 11:49 p.m. Outside, I could hear rain starting, soft tapping on the window, the kind of November rain that made everything cold and gray. I opened the drawer, pulled out a folder, thick, legal-size manila, papers I'd been holding for 3 years, papers Keith didn't know existed, papers that would change everything. I didn't open the folder, didn't need to. I'd read those documents 100 times, Mom's will. The real one. Signed, witnessed, notarized, kept on file with her attorney. Knowing it was there was enough. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee growing cold in the mug, documents spread out, reading through them for the 100th time. Maybe the 101st. My mother's will. The real one. Not the one Keith thought existed. Not the one he'd probably already called a lawyer about. Not the old will from 10 years ago that split everything 50-50. The one she'd had me witness 3 years ago, October. We'd met at a coffee shop first. She'd ordered decaf. Her hands shook when she held the cup. I need you to do something for me, she'd said. And you can't tell Keith. Later that day, we went to her lawyer's office. Margaret Chen, old family friend. Mom signed where Margaret pointed, her signature still steady despite the Parkinson's tremor. I witnessed, signed where she told me to. Margaret's paralegal witnessed too, a woman named Sandra. Got it. Notarized. Filed properly. Everything legal. Everything binding. Are you sure about this? I'd asked her in the car afterward. She'd looked at me, steady. I've never been more sure of anything. Everything legal, as solid as Mom could make it, assuming no one challenged it. Keith can't know, Mom had said afterward. If he knows, he'll contest it. Just wait until I'm gone, then file it. I'd asked her why. She'd looked at me, tired, sad. Because he only calls when he needs money. Because when I had pneumonia last year, he didn't visit once. You drove 6 hours every weekend. You sat with me. You cared. She'd paused. This isn't about punishment, Ethan. It's about who actually showed up. The will left me the house. Her savings, about $200,000, her car, her grandmother's china, the photo albums, everything. Keith got $5,000 a token, enough that he couldn't claim he was forgotten, enough that the will would stand. But he didn't know. For 3 years, he'd assumed. He was the golden child, the favored son, the one who'd inherit everything because he made more money, because he had the bigger house, because success meant something. He'd been wrong the whole time. And now, at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, he'd shown his hand. My brother and I hadn't been close for years. Growing up, we were typical brothers, fought over toys, shared a room until I was 12, annoyed each other, loved each other, normal. But somewhere around his mid-20s, Keith changed. He got into sales, enterprise software, made good money, started talking about investments and opportunities and strategic thinking, started looking at everything, including family, like a transaction. I remember the moment it became obvious. Thanksgiving, 4 years ago. Keith showed up in a new BMW, spent an hour talking about his bonus, his stock options, his wealth-building strategy. Mom had made her famous pumpkin pie. Keith was too busy checking his phone to eat it. "This is what success looks like," he'd said to me, quietly. So Mom wouldn't hear. "Maybe if you'd made better choices, you'd understand." I taught high school history, made 52 in a year, loved my job, loved my students. Keith sold enterprise software, made 6 figures, hated his job. In his eyes, that made him smarter, more deserving. When Mom broke her hip 2 years ago, Keith convinced her to move into assisted living. Just temporarily, he had said. She never moved back. Part of me understood his logic. He was the one with the stable job, the health insurance, the financial safety net. From the outside, it probably looked like he was being responsible. But he didn't ask. He decided. Keith sold her car. "You're not driving anyway," cleared out her belongings. "You don't need all this stuff." Put her house on the market. I stopped the sale, told the realtor there was a mistake. Keith was furious. "You have no authority here." "Neither do you," I'd said. "It's Mom's house, not yours." Mom kept the house, rented it to a nice family, used the income for assisted living. Keith stopped talking to me for 6 months, and now he thought he'd won. He had no idea. I didn't call Keith back, didn't text, didn't try to explain, didn't defend myself. I called Mom's lawyer instead, Margaret. The phone rang twice. "I heard," she said when she answered, voice quiet, professional, but I could hear the sadness underneath. Margaret had known Mom for 40 years. "I was going to call you in the morning." "He doesn't know, does he?" "About the will?" "No, your mother never told him. As far as Keith knows, she still had the old will, the one from 10 years ago that split everything between you both." He said she left everything to him. Margaret made a sound. Disgust mixed with resignation. "Of course he did. He probably assumed you wouldn't contest it, that you'd just accept whatever he said, that you wouldn't fight." "When do I file?" "The funeral is Saturday?" "Yes." "File Monday. I'll have everything ready. The will is as solid as we could make it, properly executed. 2 witnesses, notarized, kept on record with her attorney for 3 years. He can contest if he wants. It won't save him. He's angry." "Let him be angry. Your mother made her choice. She knew exactly what she was doing." I thanked Margaret, hung up, sat with my coffee, thought about Saturday, about seeing Keith at the funeral, acting like I didn't know about the real will, acting like I believed his lie about inheriting everything. It felt dishonest, but it's also what Mom had wanted. "Don't tell him until after I'm buried," she'd said. That day in the parking lot, wind blowing. "Let me be buried in peace. Let him have that one day to think he won, then file it Monday." So I'd wait. 4 days, then everything would change. Saturday arrived. Gray sky. Cold. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones. I drove to Greenwood Cemetery. Old place. Established 1887, the sign said. Rolling hills, massive oak trees. Mom had picked her plot years ago, next to Dad, under a maple tree that turned red every fall. Keith was there with his wife Deborah and their 2 kids, teenagers. I barely recognized them. He saw me, no wave, just a cold stare. I walked over, nodded. "Glad you could make it," he said, loud, performative. "I know you're busy." Deborah gave me a tight smile. The kids were on their phones. About 30 people showed up. Mom's friends, neighbors, distant cousins. The service was short, generic. A few people shared stories. Keith didn't speak. Neither did I. When it was over, people came up to offer condolences. Your mother was wonderful. She'll be missed. You boys must be devastated. Keith played the part well, shook hands, accepted hugs, wiped his eyes dramatically, clutched Deborah's hand. I stood off to the side, quiet, watching. After everyone left, Keith approached me. The kids were in the car, Deborah waiting by the driver's door. So, we need to talk about logistics. Logistics. The house, the accounts. I'll contact her bank next week. Get everything transferred. Should be straightforward since she left it all to me. I looked at him, his confidence, his certainty, the way he stood, like he'd already won. Keith, look, I know you might have expected something, but Mom and I talked about this years ago. She knew I'd handle everything properly. She trusted me. No offense, but you're not exactly financially savvy, teaching salary and all. I could have told him right then, could have mentioned the real Will, the lawyer, Margaret, the truth. But I didn't. For a moment I wondered if I should, not because he deserved to know, but because waiting felt cruel, like I was setting a trap. Then I remembered the phone call, 11:47 p.m. You get nothing. He'd set his own trap. Okay, I said. He looked surprised, suspicious. Okay? Yeah, handle what you need to handle. He studied me, eyes narrowed, like he was waiting for an argument, for me to fight, to contest. When it didn't come, he nodded slowly. Good, I'll keep you posted. Probably take a few weeks to sort everything out. He walked away, got in his car, drove off. I stood there alone at Mom's grave, fresh dirt, flowers people had left, white roses, her favorite. Monday, Mom, I whispered, just like you wanted. Spent Sunday going through boxes Mom had given me months ago, personal items she'd wanted me to have, things she knew Keith would throw away or sell, photo albums, Mom and Dad on their wedding day, young, smiling, pictures of Keith and me as kids, Halloween costumes, birthday parties, Christmas mornings. Before everything got complicated, her grandmother's china, the set with the blue flowers, a jewelry box, cheap wood. Dad had made it in high school shop. Class. There was a letter at the bottom of the last box, sealed envelope, my name on it in Mom's handwriting, the shaky script from the last year, Parkinson's making the letters wobble. I sat on the couch to read it, the same couch where Mom and I used to watch game shows, where she'd told me about Dad's cancer, where we'd cried after his funeral. My hands shook as I opened it. Dear Ethan, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I couldn't say this to your face, but I was never good with heavy conversations. You know that about me. I'm leaving you the house and the savings not because I love you more than Keith. I love you both. You're both my sons. But love and trust are different things. I learned that the hard way. Keith sees me as an asset, a line item, something to be managed. You see me as your mother. That difference matters more than you know. When I was sick last year, that pneumonia that nearly killed me, you were there every weekend, 6-hour drive. You sat with me, read to me, helped me walk to the bathroom when I was too weak to do it alone. Keith called twice, both times to ask if I'd made any estate decisions. Not, how are you feeling? Not, I'm sorry you're sick. Just estate decisions. When I fell and broke my hip, you drove up every weekend for 2 months, brought me meals, helped me with physical therapy exercises, sat with me and watched those terrible game shows I like. Keith sent a card, one card, with a generic message he probably had Deborah sign. I know he'll be angry when he finds out about the will. He'll say I was unfair, that I favored you, that I wasn't thinking clearly, that you manipulated me. But fairness isn't about splitting things evenly. It's about recognizing who shows up, who cares, who treats you like a person instead of an investment. You showed up. Thank you for that. Take care of yourself. Don't let Keith make you feel guilty. You earned this by simply being my son, not the son who made the most money. The son who cared the most. Love, Mom. I read it 3 times, then a 4th. My eyes blurred on the 5th. I folded it carefully with shaking hands, put it back in the envelope, put it in the folder with the will. Evidence, but also comfort. Proof that she'd chosen this, that she'd meant it, that I wasn't stealing anything. She'd given it to me, because I'd shown up when it mattered. Monday morning. The sky was still gray, same as Saturday, like the weather was stuck. I met Margaret at the county clerk's office, downtown. The building was old, built in the 1920s, stone steps worn smooth by decades of feet. She had the will, supporting documents, medical records, witness statements, everything. "This will go to probate," she explained. "Keith will be notified by mail within 3 days that he's not the primary beneficiary." "Is there anything he can do?" "Contest it, but he'd need to prove undue influence or that your mother wasn't competent. The evidence is on our side. He'll probably lose." She filed the paperwork. The clerk glanced at it a second too long, like he'd seen this movie before. Margaret's hand tightened on her folder, just slightly. We walked out. "He's going to call you," Margaret said. "Don't engage, just refer him to me." I thanked her, drove home, waited. Part of me felt guilty, like I should have told Keith at the funeral, given him. Time to process, but Mom had been clear. Let me be buried in peace. And Keith had made his choice when he called at midnight to gloat. Keith called Tuesday night, 7:15 p.m. I was making dinner. Pasta. Simple. The water was just starting to boil when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer. Unknown number. But I knew it would be him. "What the hell did you do?" His voice, screaming. I could hear rage, pure rage, the kind that makes people do stupid things. I put him on speaker. "Hello, Keith? I just got a letter from the county. They're saying you're the executor. What did you do to her?" "I didn't do anything. Mom made her own decisions." "That's not true. You manipulated her." "Mom was sharp until the end. You know that." "Then why would she leave everything to you?" Maybe ask yourself that question. Silence. Heavy breathing. Then, "I'm contesting this. I'm getting a lawyer." "It was never yours, Keith. It was Mom's, and she chose who she wanted to have it. This isn't over." I hung up. Mom had been right. Keith only cared about the money. Now that he wasn't getting it, he couldn't even pretend to grieve. Keith hired an estate litigation attorney, the kind who bills in 6-minute blocks and sleeps just fine, filed a contest 2 weeks later, claimed undue influence, claimed I'd isolated Mom, claimed she wasn't competent, the same arguments everyone uses when they lose. Margaret wasn't worried. "He has no evidence," she said. "We have everything." Keith's lawyer tried to claim the will was forged. Handwriting analysis proved it wasn't. Tried to claim I'd pressured her. Her friends testified I barely talked about the will. Tried to claim she'd promised Keith everything. No evidence existed. The contest lasted 4 months. Keith spent $15,000 on his lawyer. And lost. The judge upheld the will. Full stop. Keith got his $5,000. I got everything else. A year later, I'm living in Mom's house now. Moved in last spring. The house where I learned to ride a bike, where Mom taught me to make her famous chili, where Dad and I used to watch baseball on summer evenings. It feels right, being here, keeping the memories alive. Keith and I don't speak. He blocked my number after the judge's decision, told family I'd stolen his inheritance. Some believed him, most didn't. I don't defend myself. The people who matter know the truth. I used some of Mom's savings to set up a scholarship at my school. In her name. $2,000 a year. For students who want to be teachers, who show up, who care. Keith would call that wasteful. I call it honoring her. Because Mom didn't leave me money to make me rich. She left it because I was there. Because I showed up when it mattered. Keith thought money decided worth. Thought success meant deserving. Thought being first in the career race meant being first in line for everything. My mother thought presence did. And that difference decided everything.